All right, good afternoon. This is going to be the first half of the lecture for week 3 of SBC 205, section 367. What we're going to be talking about today is probably one of the things that I hear, and any speech teacher or public speaking teacher hears more about than anything else, about why people don't want to take a speech class or a public speaking class. And the first thing they say, when you talk about why are you reticent to take this class, we hear the same thing over and over again. When I was interviewing for this job, the head of the department said that she asked me what I thought about the idea of teaching a class where a number of people in the class were not going to be thrilled about taking the class. And I told her that I didn't really like the premise of the question, because in my opinion, most of the people that take a public speaking class absolutely hate the idea, not just don't like it, they really hate it. And when you come down to asking them, well, why is that? One phrase comes back up over and over and over again, and it's stage fright. People think that they're the only people in the world that have ever experienced stage fright. They think no one has ever experienced stage fright as bad as they have. They believe that eventually they're probably going to die from stage fright. They'll be standing in front of a group of people trying to give a speech, and they will literally fall dead. What we're going to do today is discuss stage fright. We're going to break it down into its component parts. We're going to look at the physiological causes of it. And then we're going to look at how it actually works so that you can cope with it better. It's not anything to be afraid of. So first of all, let's talk about that right off the bat. I don't want you to call it stage fright anymore. Whenever you think about calling it stage fright, I want you to take that phrase out of your vocabulary. Because stage fright isn't an accurate description of what we're talking about. The Cambridge Dictionary defines fright or fear as a strong emotion caused by a great worry about something dangerous, painful, or unknown that is happening or might happen. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as fear as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or threat. So let's, even in except for the very most extreme circumstances, when you're giving a public speech, there's no danger. You're not going to be harmed. You're not going to be killed. You're not going to suffer any bodily injury. Okay, if it does make you sick, it's actually the apprehension that's going to have an effect on you. So it's not fear that we're talking about, because there's no real physical danger to you. In reality, what we're talking about is a concern about the results of an event. And that becomes tension or anxiety. That's not fear. That's a natural tension that happens that we have to deal with. Yeah, now, okay, got it. It doesn't make any difference to you whether we call it fear or whether we call it anxiety if you wind up throwing up in front of a large audience. I get that. I understand that. But if we begin to look at it as performance apprehension as opposed to stage fright, performance apprehension is something that we can put our hands around. We've all probably felt performance apprehension and actually felt it was a positive. You talk to anybody who's competed athletically in organized athletics, and they will tell you at the beginning of the game, if they're not feeling that tension, if they're not feeling that anxiety to improve their performance, they're not going to have a good game. If you talk to actors or actresses, somebody who is involved in the theater or television or movies or film, when the director yells action, most of the good performers that I've known that were in the theatrical arts said that if they didn't feel that apprehension, if they didn't feel that tension, they didn't think they were going to have a good performance. I've even known some professional stage actors who, right before they went on the stage for the first time, would literally get physically ill. But they felt if they didn't do that, they weren't going to have a good performance. Same thing for musicians. We've all experienced, again, especially when you're my age and you grew up in the 80s, and now 30 years later, almost 40 years later, you've got touring acts that have been doing the same song since 1975. And you can just look at them up there on the stage and you're going like, they're phoning this in. They just don't care. It is no longer important to them for them to perform well. There's no tension. There's no anxiety associated with the performance. E.R. Robinson, who is a well-known great researcher in this field, said, the complete absence of feelings of apprehension is neither normal or a desirable effect. I want you to think about that for a minute. The complete absence of feelings of apprehension is neither a normal or a desirable effect. So, okay, so we don't want to hide from performance apprehension, but let's be honest right off the bat. People come to me all the time, and one of the first questions they say is, how do I get over performance apprehension? And I need to tell you right off the bat, there's not going to be any hacks in this. I'm not going to tell you by the end of this, so by the time you finish watching this video, you're not suddenly going to know the 3 things you can do to get rid of performance apprehension. That's just not going to happen, because if we go, again, let's go back to Robinson. It's not desirable. Not having performance apprehension is not desirable. The second thing we want to take into consideration, people who suffer from performance apprehension, even extreme performance apprehension, they're not mentally ill, they're not weak, and they aren't destined to be bad speakers. I can tell you story after story after story for people, including people who ultimately became president of the United States, that before they went out on stage to give a public speech would suffer from, in some cases, extreme performance apprehension. So again, just because you experience it doesn't mean you're going to give a bad speech. So put that out of your mind. So there's no hacks. It doesn't mean you're a bad speaker. And since performance apprehension is an internal process, you're going to feel the effects a lot more than the audience is going to notice the effects. Almost every time after I give a class, the first thing I know, after the first speech in a class, I ask, okay, how many people felt extreme performance apprehension? And you'll see probably 60% of the class's hands go up. Then I'll say, okay, how many of y'all saw that other members of the class were experiencing extreme performance apprehension? And I'll get maybe one hand. So again, remember, it is an internal process that nobody else is going to notice. So if you hear your voice crack, if you feel your hands shake, if you feel your knees shaking, nobody else is going to see that. Next thing we need to make sure you understand is memorizing your speech is not going to fix the problem. Okay, a lot of people think that if I get in here and I memorize my speech, if I memorize it word for word, if I cram a 6-minute speech into my head, I'm not going to have to worry about performance apprehension because it'll be all memorized. Well, here's where that is a horrible, horrible thing to try to do, is because performance apprehension will actually affect your memory. Okay? So if you try to remember your speech, you will experience performance apprehension when you stand up in front of a group or even in front of a camera when no one else is around. And ultimately what's going to happen is performance apprehension is going to cause you to forget things. Okay? So don't try to memorize your way out of it. Okay? So let's go over those real quick. There are no hacks to cure performance apprehension except for practice, and we'll talk about that. People who suffer from extreme performance apprehension can still be great public speakers. You're going to notice your mistakes a lot more, your performance apprehension a lot more than everybody else in the room because it's an internal process. And finally, memorization is not going to get you out of performance apprehension. Okay? In fact, it's just going to cause it could cause it to be worse. So let's talk about, let's skip down. We'll hold that for just a second. Okay? So what causes, let's talk about the symptoms of performance apprehension so you're not afraid. So a lot of times people, when they give their first public speech, they'll have the symptoms of performance apprehension and they'll literally think they're physically ill. And we're going to look at the phases of performance apprehension in a second. And these symptoms can start well in advance of what's going of the speech. So first of all, the causes of performance apprehension are biological, primarily. The adrenal gland secretes adrenaline. The pancreas releases large quantities of sugar. The spleen releases a lot of red blood cells to carry more oxygen than muscles. The pulse increases. The heart muscle and brain responsiveness begin to increase. Brain processes increase from process up to 400 words a minute. And when we're only speaking 150 words a minute, what that means is you now suddenly have over half your brain capacity left to worry about how bad you're feeling internally. This is an evolutionary process, okay? It's fight, flight, freeze. You know, it's something we learned very early on in the evolutionary process. When a predator would come up, you have three choices. You fight, in which case you're probably going to be injured, so all the blood drains out of your extremities into your core. That's why your hands get cold and sweaty all at the same time. Your heart rate quickens to make sure you have plenty of blood to fight them off with. You have all that sugar to increase your heart rate. If you want to turn and run, a lot of people have complained to me, surprisingly enough, that their feet get really sweaty. Well, that's because we evolved running barefoot across rocks. So the sweaty feet would help you have better traction when you're running. You know, your mouth is going to get dry because, you know, all the fluids in your system are coming back into your core. Your hands and your hands, your knees, your lips, your voice are all going to tremble because of all that adrenaline pumping into your muscles have got you all tensed up. Okay, now the nausea is because the body shuts down the digestive processes when you're in this position. So so don't worry about it. Okay, it's all natural. It's all normal. So let's go through the phases though real quick. Show you that performance apprehension is really going to be short-lived, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. We're going to draw a graph here. Okay? Oh yeah, you can see that. Okay, this is your apprehension level. And this is time. Now this is going to be time, it's going to be X. We're going to start at a point before you, as soon as you learn that you're going to be given a speech, okay? So we're going to start at point X. Now we start out, okay, here with anticipation. Now here's the thing about the anticipation phase. The anticipation phase can, literally go from the time you hear about you're going to be given a public speech until the time you actually are engaged in it. Again, the lights have gone off. There we go. Okay? So some of you are probably experiencing the anticipation phase right now. We already know that you're going to have to give a speech in this class, and you're already beginning to feel that apprehension. Now the next phase is the one that everybody worries about. The confrontation phase. All right, and that's where you actually are in front of the camera, you're in front of the group, you're beginning to do your speaking. That is where your apprehension is going to peak, and the physiological manifestations of that is going to peak. So that's going to start from about 0 minutes, okay, and it's going to go probably 2 minutes. Now here's the thing you need to remember about this. Your body cannot sustain the confrontation phase for very long. Think about it. Even the great sprinters in the world can only sprint for like 10 seconds because then their body just burns out and they can't maintain that. You're the same way. All that adrenaline, all that sugar, all those red blood cells, all that extra oxygen dumps into your system all at once. Well, your body pretty much attenuates to that fairly quickly. It gets used to that and it burns all those excess hormones off. And you begin to settle down at about 2 minutes and you enter into what we're going to call the adaptation phase. Now the adaptation phase can run, 7-8 minutes depending on how long you speak. You're probably going to feel some increased level of apprehension throughout the entirety of your speech. Okay? So you just need to be aware of that. So you're going to start with anticipation before the event takes place. You're going to hit confrontation as soon as you step up in front of the audience. But then about 2 minutes after confrontation starts, you're going to start moving into adaptation, where your body is going to adjust for all those different chemicals that are coursing through your body. So that's the biological aspects of it. So let's talk about some of the other sources. Okay? I want you to think back to the very first time you ever gave a speech. Okay? It was probably, my experience, 6th grade English, Homewood Junior High School, way back in the dark days of the early 1970s. We had to give a book report, an oral book report in our English class. We weren't told anything about public speaking. We weren't given any ideas about public speaking. We were just told, get up in front of the group and talk. And I was not the kid that was very popular. I was not the kid that was confident of himself at 12 years old. It was horrible. It was absolutely bloody horrible. Why we do that to 12 or 13-year-olds, I don't have any idea, because that's when you generally get your first broad public speaking experiences in our educational system. We don't give you any training. We don't give you any teaching. We don't give you any practice. We just say, here, talk in front of a group. And most of us have a very horrible experience with that. And that colors how we look at it for the rest of our lives. Okay? Another thing, so we have the causes. We've already discussed the biological. There's previous experiences. Okay? There's our level of skill. Okay? So biological, previous experience, levels of skill. You know, why would we expect someone to be able to stand up in front of a group of people alone with absolutely no training? Would we do that for any other activity in the public area? Would we do it for somebody who's performing a musical piece? Would we just hand them a trumpet and say, yeah, go out there and have a good time? If they were playing tennis, would we just hand them a tennis racket and say, yeah, go compete in this tournament? Golf, even team sports. We would never dream of throwing somebody into the deep end of a swimming pool just to have them to see if they could swim. Okay? But we do that, we think, because we speak informally and we talk, we assume that we can do public speaking. Okay? So those are three things that you need to consider when you're looking at the causes. Okay? But let's talk about how we cope with it. All right, some things you don't want to do to cope with it right off the bat. Okay? Don't drink. I have never seen anybody who could, if you consume alcohol, the impact is going to be, by the time the alcohol gets into your system, it's already going to be over with, and then you're going to be drunk, and you're going to be trying to give a speech drunk. I have had more than a couple of students give really bad speeches, and when I go up and ask them about, well, you were really not on today, what happened? And then you can just smell the bourbon coming off of them. So be aware of that. And again, the same thing goes for any other mood-altering substances. You don't need Valium to give a public speech. I can promise you that. What you need is practice. Practice and more practice. But here's some specific things you can do. Think about it as communication. Versus performance. And we have conversations each day, every day, all the time. We are constantly talking to people. If you remove the performance aspect of this and take it just as an opportunity to where I'm going to get to address and communicate with a number of people all at one time, and take that performance aspect out of it, make it more about communicating and exchanging information with people, okay, it really takes a lot of that apprehension out of it, because we talk to 50 people a day. What's the difference between that and talking to 50 people at once? It also, performance makes people think they have to do something different than what they normally do. In this class, we're not going to ask you to change your speaking style at all. We're going to ask you just to get up here. We're going to formalize some of the structures, but you're still going to speak the way you speak. You're going to have the vocabulary that you normally have. You're going to have all the regional dialects that you normally have, okay? All that is just part of your communication process normally. So first off, think of it as an opportunity to communicate with people, not a chance to perform in front of people, okay? Second, think about some relaxation exercises. Okay, for those of y'all who have ever been through a child birthing class, I strongly recommend the good old-fashioned cleansing breath. In through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay? Now what that does physiologically is that gives you a big dump of oxygen into your blood. So what that can do is that can slow your heart rate down. And that'll again begin to relax. Once your heart rate slows down and you get more air into your muscle, oxygen in your muscles, it begins to slow down a lot of that tension. Okay, and you can perceive your heart rate slowing down. So a cleansing breath would work as a relaxation technique. There's a technique that is almost that I learned through a class on self-hypnosis, where you sit and and you can do this lying down, you can do this sitting, and probably not standing up, but where you start at your toes and you go, I'm going to relax my toes, and then you focus on just relaxing your toes, and then you start next with your feet. I'm going to relax my feet. I'm going to relax my feet, and you just say that to yourself over and over again, concentrating on how your feet feel. Next, you move to your ankles, your shins, your thighs, your fingers, your hands, okay? And you walk through that entire muscle, all your major muscle groups, and just think about them relaxing, okay? Then the last thing I'm going to say as far as a relaxation exercise is, let me give you a little visual demonstration of what normally happens. Okay, I'm going to push this over here. We're going to walk around a little bit. This is what oftentimes happens at the beginning of a speech. So people will be sitting out here, and they'll hear their name called, Bob Smith. Good day, I'm here to talk to you, and they just immediately leap into talking, okay? That's not a good idea. Nothing will make you show that you're in more control over this speaking and communication environment. Nothing will show that you are more comfortable up here to the audience than taking a second and pausing and looking around the room. You do not have to start talking as soon as you get in front of the group. Take a second, look around the room, make sure they understand that you're up there to talk. In fact, when we start talking about attention devices, standing up here quietly is probably one of the best one ever. But again, remember, this is how that should work. Bob Smith, you're next. As you've all just heard, my name is Bob Smith, and today I'm here to talk to you about a 2 or 3 second pause at the beginning of a speech will oftentimes not only communicate to the audience, okay, but also communicate to yourself that you feel more in control. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about as far as ways to coping mechanisms is cognitive restructuring. Now, cognitive restructuring forces you to take your fears, look at them, write them down, and then look at each and every single fear you have and ask yourselves, is this reasonable? Okay. So what's your biggest fear when you stand up here in front of an audience? That you fail. Okay. What's the real impact of that? Well, these people aren't going to really try to, care. They either don't care or they're actually there to support you. Most audiences will support a speaker. Okay, so even if you do really badly, you quote, fail, nothing's going to happen. Okay, you're afraid you're going to pass out. Have you ever seen anyone stand in front of an audience while giving a speech and literally pass out? I've been doing this, I've been teaching this since 1986. That's 32 years, and I've never seen anyone pass out in front of a group just because they had performance apprehension. Okay, now I've known people that have stopped drinking water 5 hours before their performance. I've known people that have stopped eating for a couple of days because they felt so nervous and they passed out because of dehydration or lack of food. Okay, but because of performance apprehension, the chances of you passing out are about zero. I'm afraid I'm going to get up there, I'm going to be so nauseous, I'm going to throw up again. I've been teaching this for 32 years. I have been doing public speaking going all the way back to high school in 1978 or 77. Okay, never seen anybody throw up. Okay, so cognitive restructuring, detail your fears, write them down, and then ask yourself if they're really realistic. Okay, some specific things. Number one, your level of apprehension will be directly related to your level of preparation. So prepare for your speech. If you think you're going to get up here and wing it, that's not going to help. I promise you, a lot of people think, back of their mind, if I don't actually acknowledge that I have to give a speech, if I just ignore the fact that I'm going to give a speech and I just jump up there at the last minute, my performance apprehension will be less and I'll give her better performance. That's not going to happen. Okay? Practice, 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 practice. Get it, when we do speeches in this class, they're going to be on tape and you're going to have to upload them to YouTube. Okay? So practice and prepare. Okay? In addition to practice and prepare, practice out loud. Words have muscle memory. Combinations of words have muscle memory. So if you're standing up in front of a group for the very first time and you're saying the things you want to say for the very first time, you're going to get tongue-tied. And getting tongue-tied like that is going to cause more problems. Okay? So it becomes a vicious circle. I haven't practiced. So I'm going to get tongue-tied. That's going to make my performance apprehensions worse. So we practice a speech by giving the speech, not by writing the speech, not by looking at your note cards. We practice the speech by giving the speech and doing the speech itself. Okay? This is going to sound a little weird, but dress appropriately. There's nothing worse for causing performance apprehension than going into an environment where everybody else is wearing business suits and you show up wearing blue jeans and a golf shirt. Okay, make sure you understand what the environment is and be ready for it. Okay? Again, the flip side is you're showing up and everybody's wearing blue jeans and t-shirts and you're there wearing a three-piece suit. You're obviously overdressed. So make sure you understand the environment that you're going to be speaking in. Okay? Focus on your message. Don't make the event about you and your nerves. Make the event about what you're trying to communicate to people. If it's important enough for you to stand up in front of a group of people and talk to them, it should be important enough to them for them to want to listen to it. Okay? Remember, confrontation is short-lived. That confrontation phase of performance apprehension is only going to last 2 to 3 minutes. And then your body cannot sustain that level, okay, without additional input or with additional threats. So if you do nothing but just stand in front of the group for 2 to 3 minutes, you're going to begin to feel yourself calm down. Okay, as you begin to speak and as you begin to focus on the message, it'll happen even quicker. Okay, and then finally, let your nonverbals convince yourself. So I'm saying here, let your nonverbals help. Okay, going to move the camera again. Another quick movement so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. So the best position for speaking in class, and I can't tilt it sideways, but my feet are shoulder width apart, my hands are to my side, my head is up, my shoulders are comfortably pushed back, my back is straight, okay? I want you to think about just standing like that. Now, how did most people, when they get up here for the first time and start to speak? Okay, what does this tell yourself? Okay, this tells yourself that I'm nervous, I don't want to be here, I'm defensive, I'm closed off, I'm not ready to communicate with these people, I'm really terrified of what's going on here, okay? The next thing you're going to do after you finish this lecture is I want you to watch Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on power posing, okay? I want you to let your nonverbals convince yourself that you are comfortable up here speaking. Amy Cuddy says, fake it till you make it, Okay? I want you to fake being confident. I want you to stand with your shoulders, with your feet shoulder width apart, with your hands down by your side. I want you to do that until you believe that you're ready to give a public speech comfortably. Okay? All right, so that's about 30 minutes on performance apprehension. Remember, we're not going to call it stage fright, and we're not going to be afraid of it, and we're not going to see it as a negative, because remember what Robinson said, absence of stage fright or apprehension is not a good thing. Okay? And again, as always, I'll end every one of these lectures like this. My email address is mcinnisv, MCINNISV, at atc.edu. I'll be getting you some more information out in the next week about your speeches, when they're going to be due, and exactly what I expect to see from them. Okay, and I've already given you, you should have already put your introductory speeches online. I'll be checking for those. I would have checked for those the day I put this lecture out. So go from here, look for the link for Amy Cuddy's TED Talk about power posing. After you watch that, I'll be back with another lecture for week 3 in SBC 205, section 367.